Hi everybody, and welcome to our very last review of the character projects. So today we're just going to talk a little bit about everyone's character project, see if there's anything else that we can possibly, in the time we have left, small changes that we might be able to do to enhance the design. Um, yeah, and I have two things to say, I guess. I could always say a lot more, but just two things to say. One is that this revision process, this particular class, and I know we've got other classes that do this, where you have one project that you're working on for a while, and especially when you get into this fine-tuning process. So like what we've been doing for the last few versions of the character, where we're not necessarily, like, after we added the background and the text, we're really just kind of experimenting, seeing where we can take it. And one of the things that I think is always interesting is how um, sometimes you can take a design that you really feel is like just great the way it is, and then you do a little more work on it, and suddenly you realize, oh, I've taken it to a new level. Like, I've really, like, you can go from that version that you thought, "Hey, that's finished, it looks really good," and then you can actually do, like, maybe even very small things or maybe big things, but even small things, and you'll notice, wow, that really makes a big impact. Just by which to say that, in design, a lot of times we just never do feel like we've completely finished a project. I think a lot of people in the visual arts feel that way. You can always keep working on something. And sometimes you really can go a lot further. You can kind of, in a way, push your own design skills a little further. That's, I think, what you're really doing. Uh, and then sometimes you just know it's done, and that you don't, if you work on it anymore, you have you could potentially um, take some life and freshness out of it. So it's always like a balancing act. Sometimes it's hard to know, but in any case, this process of revising and revising can be really valuable to see how far you can work your assignments and develop your skills, and also change your eye as well, like your visual acuity of what makes a good design. So I think that's really um, a really good process. So the other thing I want to just mention too is that look back, if you have a chance, look back at your sketch and see where you've come all the way from your sketch to the final assignment. I think you'll be very surprised, pleasantly surprised. And just in terms of Photoshop as well, the skills you've learned in this class, I also want to emphasize that the skills you've learned in this class are very, I would say, they're pretty advanced. Like, of course, Photoshop is a pretty big program. There's so many things you can keep learning and doing in Photoshop. But what you've learned in this class is really, I think, will make you look like you do know Photoshop, even if you're still kind of fine-tuning the skills you've learned. Like, you have to refresh what a layer mask is later. That's perfectly fine. But the idea, a lot of the ideas now of adjustment layers and working with color and layer masks, puppet warp. These are all really pretty amazing skills. And also just this idea of non-destructive editing, which we've learned, which I guarantee you a lot of people working in Photoshop who even make their living on Photoshop don't know how to non-destructively edit an image the way you guys now know how to do that. And it's just because we've been learning from, I think, a really good textbook and really good assignments to be able to do that. So keep practicing these skills if you can. Every once in a while, if you find an image that you find inspiring, and you want to do a layer mask with it or put it on a new background just for fun, even in your own, if you take your own pictures, experiment, maybe doing some of the corrections that we did, right? Like taking things out or adjusting the color. Just keep experimenting, because that keeps your skills fresh, and that's also really valuable. You'll never forget the skills, but sometimes it's like you have to keep reminding yourself to in order to do it. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to say. Okay, so I'm going to switch over into Photoshop now. See, well, that's a very interesting discovery, that when you blurred the background image, you were left with your cleanup brushstrokes. I've never had that happen yet. I don't think I've ever done that particular series of steps, but that's very interesting to know, isn't it? Um, and I'm glad you found a solution. Yeah. Yeah, so let's see. Yes, absolutely. It's fine that you just did your JPEG. That's just fine, because you know, I actually save all of the Photoshop files you guys submit. So if I ever need to go back to a previous one, just to, and I know you did layer mask, which is really the purpose. The purpose of the Photoshop files earlier on was just to make sure we were working with layer masks and layers and adjustment layers. So yeah. Okay, I love the new color. I think that really it's interesting how it's a little more like a brighter color, which I think makes it pop, which I think is good for your design, that the text stands out, and it also I think does really nicely tie in with your color, the background. Yeah, it looks really good. I don't have any more changes. I think you've you know, early on you did a lot of work on your character, and it really came together quite beautifully with all of the different parts in the background, and also the lighting and the shadows you've done. And thank you so much for also your the videos you've been adding. I haven't mentioned that because it's just slipped my mind, but thank you so much. It's really great that you were willing to do that. I don't get a chance to necessarily go into that much detail with all of the techniques, and some of them I just really don't know. The same way, you know, that you might know shadows, because Photoshop is a really big program, so I really appreciate that. You've been giving some really good advice to people and sharing your knowledge. That's just really wonderful. Okay, yeah, good job. And so at this point, you know, just feel free to submit this to the final submission area with your report. Your report is just uh, for everybody. It's just the questions that are in the final submission area for this week. Just you can put them in the comments when you submit your assignment. Kayla, let's see. Selective color. I'm glad that was useful. Yes, that's one of my favorite adjustment layer techniques is using the selective color. It can work really well with a lot of things where when you change the color, I think, yeah, you did here, it really can look very natural. Like that was like the original photograph, which is really what we're aiming to do. So it looks like you maybe did that in a few different places. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It looks really great. I really do like the way you've kind of, um, you know, sort of created like this lighter in places. You know, overall pink. I think it looks really great. I think the text looks nice in this placement as well. And the sky, it does. It looks great. You've left just enough of the clouds that we get this, and it. I also like what you did here. You know, using the tools to remove things, and also just kind of it creates more lightness by just having a few of these clouds, and it also really enhances, like it kind of frames her. It's what you've done here, so that looks really good. I don't think I see anything else that you need to do here. I think that Christy has made just a comment about maybe doing some shadow on the face. I think that could look really great if you want to do that. But I think this looks really good, and I don't see any change. I don't have any suggestions. I think you put in a lot of work, and it's really paid off. Yes, I think you had, you know, this is a great example of, I think yours is a great example of how I really think that this whole upper area was quite resolved originally. Um, and so you experimented with adding something, and then you went back to the original version, which I think, again, that happens too, where you experiment and you return back. Um, and for that reason, you know, when we're working digitally, it's always a great idea on your own when you save files. You know, you can really experiment a lot with different files. Like you can just keep naming it like version 1, version 2, version 3, you know, and save them. And then this is what I've sometimes done is just kind of gone through a whole bunch of different possibilities and saved them, and then gone back and just looked at them one by one. So each one, it didn't matter too much what I did because I knew that I had a backup. So this is the amazing thing of working digitally. Yeah, this looks really good. I don't see any changes you need to make at this point. I think what you did looks really good, and I really like in your design. I really like the dimension you've created. It's very realistic. The wall and the way that the shadow falls on it just really gives you a sense of space, like exactly how far your character is away from the wall. You've got a lot of nice movement, and you worked really beautifully with the color and the text to bring it all together. So yeah, nice job. I don't see any changes you need to make. It's working really well. Yeah, you know, I actually think a gradient in your case works quite well. Although I do like I like the background before, with the exception of it being a bit busy. But I think that this works pretty nicely. Normally I have to say I always encourage people to actually use a photograph in the background to give it a context. But in your case, there's something like about the candy quality that seems to lend itself to something like this background. Like I do think it goes together with the whole kind of marshmallow candy idea. So yeah, so keep it like that. Um, okay, so I think we've talked quite a lot about the color. I think the color's looking really good. Um, and the shadow. And the only thing I might suggest here is just maybe a little bit with the space. Like so you've got everything sort of moved over to the right. And so that can tend to make it feel a little maybe a little heavy on the right. I might want to like inch every like especially your character maybe your character inch it over just a little bit to the left. I think that would be good. And maybe down a little bit as well so it doesn't crowd the text so much. You know, so you give a little more breathing room for your text. So those are, you know, a couple changes I might still make. You know, if you think of you see anything else that you might, you know, want to experiment with, I do still think you could experiment a little bit more with the text treatment. Um, you know, just kind of maybe go through like use the text tool, you know, just select the text and maybe go through the different text, um, like experiment with the different text you have on your computer and see if there's anything else that maybe appeals to you. I've always felt like this is what I've said before is that it feels like it could be a little something a little thicker or heavier because of the sort of the thickness of a lot of your elements. But again, you know, I think the color's working okay, but that would be something that um, just on a creative level you could still experiment with. But overall, I think this is looking good, and you've really really developed your character in a. I think your color and the sort of the overall concept is very nice. Yeah, I think that this background is definitely working better for your character. It's just I think it's a good choice. And between these two you've chosen, I yeah, you know, it's interesting. I think this one is the one I would choose. Even though there's a little bit more detail in the background, I think um I like that you can see a little bit more about where he's standing. And I think the color is really, I think works for your character as well, because you've got the combination back here of the grays and the browns. And I think that that ties in with the natural colors of your character. So that's awesome. And what else do I like about it? I actually really like the three spotlights here too, for some reason, even though it's, you know, it adds a little more detail to the background. I think it's a nice choice. So, yeah. So let's see, what could we do now? Um, Experiment a little bit more. One thing I would do is take your text and move it down just a little bit more. You know, it's at the top, and I guess you'd have to move this one down, this little part too, um, to so that it you want to always leave. And again, this is not really a typography class, but in typography we always learn to leave what we call a little margin around edges. You know, just a little breathing room. If you look at any, like if you go through and look at advertisements or any type of graphic design, you'll notice that unless somebody's trying to like really do something very experimental and cut off text around the edges, what they try to do is they bring it in a little bit. So I might do that. And let's just see your banana. I like that banana uh, um, more, like the faded quality. I think that looks a lot better. For some reason, it does look like um, that it's sort of faded a little bit. Like there's and I the reason why I did this was just to see the original image, but it looks like the original image maybe uh, got deleted, like the background around it. So it almost looks like it's a little transparent in places. It's not a bad thing, but it would be nice maybe to get a little bit more solidity to the banana. So I might bring that original photo back in and then apply the layer mask again. Yeah. So yeah, I think the arms are looking better, which is good. Looks like maybe you replaced the arms, or I can't remember now. I know you had an issue with the watermarks, and it also looks like the yeah, it looks like maybe the layer mask also, the background was deleted there too. So might be good to, yeah, just, so I think this, there we go. So that's what you want it to sort of really look like here. To have your photo there, just, you know, what we learned back in milestone 3 test 2. So anyhow, so I know you can do it, which is great. So if you want to, you could work on the other ones a little bit more too. The other thing too you could is just go and maybe trim a little bit of these edges here to remove the white, any little bits of white that you can see here. There's two ways to do that. You can do it the manual technique that we've learned about, where you click on the layer mask and you grab your brush tool and then you go in, use the bracket tool here, and then you just sort of remove it like this, like so. Or the other thing is you can double click on your layer mask, and then what happens is you get the edge refinement tool that pops up, and then you can use that to let Photoshop, see Photoshop, I was pretty sure that Photoshop would be able to do that because it's such a nice clear contrast, you know, white against the darker edges. So you can sort of go in there and just kind of clean that up anywhere you see. I think that looks okay down there. Yeah, so something like that. And so I would just kind of go through all of your images and just make sure that the edges, I would do the edges too here. Again, just kind of clean up these edges here. Anywhere that you see there's a little bit of um, things you can clean up, like, and so like here it looks like maybe the rope could have, let's see here. Oh, I see. So it looks like the layer mask, oh, I think we talked about this before. The layer mask got deleted on these ones too. And again, you know, layer masks are a little tricky. So to learn, again, to just get a refresher on the layer mask, the milestone 3 test 2, if you go through that, it'll help you bring in the photo and add that layer mask. So I think you, and then, so here, I think that transparency is caused by, oh, is this particular layer here, it looks like the opacity's been turned down. So I would turn that up, right? So that you don't see those ropes, unless there was some creative reason why, but it seems to me like you want to make sure that they look like they're disappearing, you know? Looks like maybe, you can just see I'm kind of looking at different things here. It looks like maybe this layer here got placed, it'd be nice if it went underneath the box so that it doesn't look like it's covering up that corner. And that's really easy to do because all you do is you pull it down, like I'm seeing how I'm dragging here. And I don't know how far you need to go here. Let's just go, I'll just go right above this and see if that does it. There we go. You see how that just now, you can adjust the layers and stack them however you want. Okay. So I think that would be some of the main things I'd work on here. Just kind of cleaning things up a little bit. That already looks a little bit better. Okay, yeah. I'd work on that a little bit more, and with the text too, I'm going back to the text a little bit because in some ways I'm wondering if the text really does need to have this kind of treatment behind it. You know, maybe it gets a little too busy. I don't know what you think, but maybe you don't need that. So yeah, you know, sort of make it just a little bit simpler. But I do like the funkiness of the font. I think that really suits Garbage Dump Dan. Okay, so yeah, nice choice with the background. I think it's really great, and maybe just kind of keep experimenting a little bit more with the technical end of things. Thank you so much for sending me the file for your um, project using WeTransfer. That really helped me out. Yeah, okay, good. I love the celery arms. I think they're super cute, and I like how green they really fit with the rest of the um, the colors. That looks really good. And you've got blue and you've tied in some blue here. So that looks really good. And then the background I think is really good too. You know, the way you've blurred it out to start. I could see even going even a little further down if you wanted to. But I really think it's starting to really highlight again, you know, look how now we can see the text so much better. It really has solved a lot of things, which is great. So, okay, I think that's all I really see here. I think it's really, you know, you really solved a lot of the things. Maybe if you're interested, you could add a little movement to your character. Movement can be done just so simply, like you can just take and, you know, think about what would your character, so your character's just standing sort of, you know, at almost like at attention sort of, but you could maybe, if you wanted to, you could experiment with a little movement. So, and you have some movement with the feet, which I think is really cute, but you could, you know, you could experiment with that if you like. Um, with your background too, you know, you can use that selective um, color, like you've got a little pink in here. Why not take and instead of having pink, which is not a part of any of your colors, you could use selective color to change that to red or blue, really whatever you want. So, and just to review doing that process, you go up here. So we've got the this layer selected, and we can go to selective color right here, and make sure we clip it. And then, so what you do is you choose the color in the photo you want to change. So I think it could be probably a magenta. Sometimes you have to experiment. It could be magenta or red, but then you can take that, and then when you work on it, you see how it's just actually adjusting the flower. Sometimes you just have to kind of experiment with these different sliders and see, you know, what it will do. It's kind of, so that's, so this indicates to me that maybe we'd also want to go with the red and see if um, the red also does it. So it's actually kind of desaturating it a little bit. So not quite there yet, but that could be something you experiment with, or if you don't get a good solution with that, alternately, what you could do is just remove that element, you know, using the tools that we've learned last week to just, or this week, I should say, um, to just, you know, take it out. Um, but yeah, okay, that's it. I think it's looking really good. If you see anything else that you want to experiment with, by all means. But otherwise, I think you've really, yeah, you've really done a good job here, especially on the all of the different technical end, and you know, choosing these wonderful photographs with so much volume and texture, and building this little cute character. And yeah, okay, so you know, sometimes you do have to sacrifice certain things to create your concept, you know. And as I've been mentioning, you know, it's I was a little concerned about the just the way these elements fit in, you know, with all of the detail. And I still feel that way, but I totally respect, you know, that you feel like this is the way it should be. Sometimes you just have to go with that, that maybe you sacrifice a little bit of the design quality because of your idea. Um, but I do like, you know, what you did here with the color. I like the whole metallic look. You know, you looks like you've added an adjustment layer here, which is awesome. Yeah, that looks great. And I like the larger text here. I think that's a really great idea to make the text large. And Christy has some great ideas on working with shadows, which I think is really, you know, if you can apply that, I think that would be really great to, you know, create similar shadows or lighting on your objects. Um, and so I think, you know, in light of what you said about, you know, how you want to work with your character, the only things that I might think about, there's one is that, mm, so just looking spatially now that you've got the text here, something I'm thinking you could experiment with is moving your entire character to the right, like so that your character is actually, and this is just one of those things that in photography, when somebody's like when you take a picture of somebody who's facing in a certain direction, what you tend to do is move them, uh, like in this case, this way, so that they're moving into an empty space. Does that make sense? So like this character would be rolling into this space if he was a little bit further over. It's just kind of like so that it kind of looks like it has, and it's not exactly a convention, it's just what I think seems like a natural way to compose it. So you might experiment with that, moving that over, and then maybe moving your text over to the left to balance it, you know? Let's see, do you have a link here? I was going to see if I could do that, but I think you'd have to do it one by one with your pieces. But yeah, you get the idea. So that then you'd kind of balance your text over to the left. So you might give that a try. And yeah, um, you might consider maybe even like removing a little bit of these elements, these kind of graphics and sort of little knobs and things on your hands, just to kind of, if you can, to just sort of make them look a little bit more like the form, seeing the form underneath rather than these details, which I keep looking at and thinking, what's going on there? Um, so that you might want to do that. And you might want to, think about doing an adjustment layer. Well, I don't know. With the cane, I was thinking maybe to make it match, but you've got brown in the background, so maybe that works. So yeah, so those are some of my suggestions. And otherwise, nice job putting it all together and working with the layer mask. That's awesome. And I look forward to seeing your final submission.